At Christmas dinner, my sister opened the door, rolled her eyes, and said, "We don't want you here. Go ruin someone else's holiday." I looked inside and saw my whole family around the table, laughing. So I just nodded, turned around, and said, "Got it." 5 minutes later, my dad burst through the door, yelling my name. I, 31M, thought I had a family until Christmas dinner last year showed me exactly where I stood. What happened next changed everything between us forever. I pulled into my sister's driveway at exactly 6 p.m., the same time we'd agreed on 3 weeks earlier. The house was lit up like a Christmas catalog, with those warm yellow lights my sister had always been obsessed with since we were kids. I could hear laughter spilling out through the windows as I walked up the front steps, balancing the wine I'd brought and the gifts I'd carefully wrapped the night before. The door opened before I could knock, and there she stood. My sister looked me up and down with this expression I'd never seen before, like I was some unwanted solicitor interrupting her perfect evening. She rolled her eyes in this theatrical way and told me we didn't want me there, that I should go ruin someone else's holiday instead. I stood there for a moment, completely frozen. Through the doorway behind her, I could see our entire family gathered around her dining table. Mom was laughing at something our cousin had said. Dad was carving what looked like the biggest turkey I'd ever seen. My brother was there with his wife and their 2 kids. Even our elderly aunt had made the trip from 3 states away. Everyone was there. Everyone except me, apparently. The realization hit me like ice water. This wasn't some miscommunication or scheduling mix-up. This was intentional. They had planned this dinner, invited everyone, and deliberately excluded me. My sister was just the one who got stuck delivering the message when I showed up anyway. I looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly and told her I got it. I turned around, walked back to my car, set the gifts and wine in my back seat, and drove away. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. 5 minutes later, as I was sitting at the red light 2 blocks from her house, my phone started buzzing. Then I heard it, someone shouting my name from behind me. I looked in my rearview mirror and saw Dad's truck racing up the street, hazard lights flashing. He pulled up next to me at the light and rolled down his window, yelling for me to pull over. The desperation in his voice made me comply. We ended up in the parking lot of a closed gas station, both of us sitting in our cars with engines running and windows down. Dad looked completely panicked as he asked what had just happened. I told him exactly what his daughter had said to me, word for word. His face went white, then red, then something close to purple. He insisted there had been some mistake, that I was supposed to be there, that he'd specifically asked my sister to make sure I knew dinner was at 6. That's when the pieces started falling into place. Dad explained that 3 weeks ago, he'd told my sister to coordinate with everyone about Christmas dinner. She was supposed to call me, confirm the time, ask what I wanted to bring. She'd told him she'd taken care of everything. But she'd lied. She'd never called me. The only reason I knew about dinner at all was because I'd run into our cousin at the grocery store 2 weeks earlier, and she'd mentioned how excited she was for Christmas dinner at my sister's house. I'd assumed I'd somehow missed the official invitation and just showed up. Dad was furious in a way I'd rarely seen. He told me to follow him back to the house, that we were going to sort this out right now. But I was done. I told him I appreciated him coming after me, but I wasn't interested in being somewhere I clearly wasn't wanted. I wasn't going to force my way into a family gathering where I'd been intentionally excluded. He kept insisting it was all a misunderstanding, but I could see the truth in his eyes. This wasn't the first time my sister had done something like this. She'd been pushing me out of family events for years, just more subtly. The graduation party, where she forgot to tell me the location, had changed. The birthday dinner, where she said she thought someone else was bringing me. The wedding planning meetings I somehow never got invited to. Dad sat there in his truck, looking older than I'd ever seen him, and finally admitted that my sister had issues with me that he'd been trying to ignore for too long. He said she'd been complaining for months about how I was irresponsible, unreliable, always causing drama. None of it was true, but she'd been building this narrative to justify pushing me out. I asked him why he hadn't said anything, why he'd let her control family events like this. He said he'd hoped she'd grow out of it, that keeping the peace seemed more important than confronting her. But seeing my face when I walked away from that door had shown him how wrong he'd been. We talked in that parking lot for almost an hour. Dad promised he was going to handle this, that there would be consequences for what she'd done. But I told him not to bother. I was done trying to force relationships with people who didn't want me around. When I got home that night, I made a decision that would change everything. I started planning my exit from this family dynamic entirely. Update 1. The fallout from Christmas dinner was immediate and brutal. Dad apparently went back to my sister's house and confronted everyone at the table about what had happened. According to my brother, who called me later that night, it turned into the biggest family fight anyone could remember. Dad demanded to know who else had known about the plan to exclude me. Mom claimed she thought I'd simply decided not to come. My brother insisted he'd asked my sister twice if I was coming, and she'd told him yes. Our aunt said she'd specifically brought an extra gift for me and had been wondering where I was. But the truth came out piece by piece. My sister had been telling different people different stories for weeks. She'd told Mom I was probably going to my girlfriend's family dinner instead. She'd told our aunt I might be working. She'd told my brother I'd confirmed, but might be late. Everyone had assumed someone else was handling the communication with me. My brother was furious when he realized what had really happened. He'd always been the peacekeeper in our family, but even he couldn't defend this. He told me Dad had given my sister an ultimatum right there at the dinner table. Either she apologized and made things right with me, or she could find somewhere else to host future family gatherings. My sister apparently lost it completely. She started screaming about how I was always the victim, always making everything about me, how the family was better off without my drama. She listed every grudge she'd been holding for years, things I didn't even know she was upset about. Apparently, I'd offended her 3 years ago by leaving her birthday party early because I had food poisoning. I'd hurt her feelings 2 years ago by not volunteering to help with decorations for Mom's surprise party, even though no one had asked me to help. I'd disappointed her last year by bringing a store-bought dessert to Thanksgiving instead of making something homemade. None of these were things she'd ever mentioned to me. She'd been collecting these perceived slights like ammunition, building a case against me in her head while smiling to my face at every family gathering. The dinner party fell apart completely. Our aunt left early, saying she didn't want to be around this kind of negativity during the holidays. My brother packed up his family and went home. Mom started crying. Dad was so angry he couldn't speak, but I wasn't done with my own plans. While my family was imploding over Christmas dinner, I was at home researching job opportunities in other cities. I'd been thinking about making a change for a while, and this situation had just provided the perfect motivation. By New Year's Eve, I had 3 interviews lined up in different states. By the end of January, I had 2 job offers. I accepted the position that would take me the farthest from home. Update 2. I waited until I had everything arranged before telling anyone about my decision to move. The job was perfect, better pay, better opportunities, and over 1,000 miles away from the family drama I was leaving behind. I told Dad first, during one of our regular coffee meetings that had started after the Christmas disaster. He'd been trying so hard to repair our relationship and keep me connected to the family. When I explained that I was moving away for good, he looked like I'd punched him in the stomach. He begged me to reconsider, promising that things would be different, that he wouldn't let my sister control family events anymore. But I explained that this wasn't just about her. This whole situation had shown me that I'd been trying to maintain relationships with people who saw me as optional. I deserved better than that. Dad asked if this was his punishment for not standing up to my sister sooner. I assured him it wasn't about punishment. It was about self-respect. I couldn't keep investing emotional energy in people who saw my presence as negotiable. The conversation with Mom was harder. She cried and asked what she'd done wrong, how she could fix this. I explained that she hadn't done anything wrong, but she also hadn't done anything right. When push came to shove, she'd chosen to avoid conflict rather than stand up for me. That wasn't enough anymore. My brother took it better than I expected. He said he understood why I needed to leave, even though he wished things could be different. He promised to keep in touch regardless of where I ended up, and unlike everyone else's promises over the years, I actually believed him. I didn't tell my sister about the move directly. I figured she'd find out eventually, and frankly, I didn't care what she thought about it. She'd gotten what she wanted, a family without me in it. But 3 days before my moving truck was scheduled to arrive, she showed up at my apartment. She looked terrible, like she hadn't been sleeping well. She said she'd heard about my plans to move and wanted to talk things through. She claimed she'd been doing a lot of thinking since Christmas and realized she might have been unfair to me. I let her talk for almost an hour. She apologized for excluding me from dinner, admitted she'd been holding grudges about things that weren't really that important, and promised things would be different if I stayed. She even cried a little, which was something I'd rarely seen from her. But her apology felt hollow. She kept qualifying everything. She was sorry I felt excluded, sorry if her actions seemed intentional, sorry that the situation had been blown out of proportion. She wasn't actually taking responsibility for deliberately pushing me out of the family. She was just sorry that her plan had backfired so spectacularly. I thanked her for coming over and told her I forgave her, but that forgiveness didn't mean I was staying. I'd already learned too much about how expendable I was to everyone. Moving away wasn't about anger anymore. It was about choosing to invest my time and energy in relationships that were actually reciprocal. She left angry, muttering something about how I was being dramatic and proving her point about always making everything about me. Even her apology had been conditional on me doing what she wanted. Update 3. Moving away was the best decision I ever made. The new city was amazing, my job was challenging and rewarding, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe without worrying about family politics. I stayed in touch with Dad and my brother through regular phone calls and video chats. Mom and I talked occasionally, though our conversations were always a bit strained. She kept hinting that I should come home for holidays, that the family wasn't the same without me. But she still didn't seem to understand that the family had made it clear I was optional long before I made myself unavailable. My sister and I didn't speak at all for almost 6 months. Then she started sending occasional texts, memes, family photos, random updates about her life. I responded politely, but didn't engage beyond basic courtesy. I wasn't interested in rebuilding a relationship with someone who'd shown me so clearly what they thought of me. About 8 months after I moved, Dad called with news that changed everything. My sister's marriage was falling apart. Her husband had apparently been having an affair for over a year, and she'd just found out about it. The divorce was going to be messy and expensive. Part of me felt bad for her. Nobody deserves to be cheated on. But I couldn't help thinking about how she'd treated me when she thought her life was perfect and mine was the problem she needed to solve. Dad asked if I'd consider calling her, offering some support during this difficult time. He said she'd been asking about me, wondering if I might come home for a visit. But I declined. I'd learned that being family doesn't mean you're obligated to be available for people who've shown you that your presence in their life is conditional on their convenience. 3 weeks later, my sister called me directly. She was crying before she even said hello, telling me about the divorce, about how isolated she felt, about how she'd lost most of her friends during the marriage. She said she understood now how I must have felt at Christmas, being pushed out and excluded. She asked if I could forgive her and maybe come home for a visit. But her newfound understanding felt too convenient. She hadn't gained empathy for my situation. She'd just found herself in a similar position and suddenly realized it was painful. That's not growth. That's just experiencing consequences. I told her I was sorry she was going through a difficult time, but that I wasn't the person she should call for support. I suggested she reach out to the family members who were actually present in her life, who'd chosen to stick around through everything. The conversation ended badly. She accused me of being cold and unforgiving, of abandoning the family when someone really needed help. But I wasn't abandoning anyone. I was simply declining to be available for people who'd made it clear I was only welcome when they needed something from me. Final update. It's been 2 years since I moved away, and my life has never been better. I've built genuine friendships with people who value my presence consistently, not just during their personal crises. I've been promoted twice at work. I've started dating someone who treats me like a priority, not an option. Dad and my brother visit me a few times a year, and those relationships have actually gotten stronger. Without the family drama and my sister's manipulation, we've been able to connect on a much more authentic level. They've both admitted that the family dynamic was unhealthy for everyone, not just me. Mom and I have found our own rhythm. She's finally stopped pushing me to come home and started making an effort to visit me instead. She's begun to understand that keeping the peace isn't the same as maintaining healthy relationships. My sister and I have had no direct contact for over a year. According to family updates, she's still going through the divorce, still struggling with the isolation she created for herself. Sometimes Dad hints that she asks about me, but I've made it clear that ship has sailed. I don't hate her, but I don't miss her either. She taught me an important lesson about recognizing when relationships are one-sided, even when they're supposed to be unconditional. Family isn't about obligation or guilt. It's about mutual respect and genuine care for each other's well-being. The best part about my new life is that every relationship in it is intentional. Nobody is here because they feel trapped by family obligation or social expectation. They're here because they want to be, and that makes all the difference. Looking back, getting turned away from that Christmas dinner was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to see the truth about relationships I'd been making excuses for, and gave me the motivation to build something better for myself. Sometimes the greatest gift your family can give you is showing you exactly who they are when they think it doesn't matter. My sister thought excluding me was consequence-free, but she was wrong. The consequence was losing me entirely, and unlike her marriage, this wasn't something that could be fixed with apologies and promises to do better.